The year was 1882, and the afternoon sun blazed mercilessly over the small frontier town of Silver Creek, Montana. Sarah Catherine Morrison stepped down from the dusty train car, her emerald silk dress already wilting in the oppressive heat. She clutched her leather valise tightly, scanning the rough wooden platform for any sign of her intended husband. "Miss Morrison?" a gruff voice called out. Sarah turned to see a weathered man in his 60s approaching, his hat in his weathered hands. "I'm afraid I have some unfortunate news, miss. My name's Doc Henderson. Thomas Whitmore, well, he passed on 3 weeks ago. Fever took him." Sarah's heart sank. She had traveled over 2,000 miles from Boston to marry a man she'd never met, responding to his advertisement for a mail-order bride. Now she was stranded in a town she'd never heard of, with barely enough money for a return ticket. "What am I supposed to do now?" she whispered, more to herself than to the kind doctor. From across the dusty main street, Jake Sullivan watched the scene unfold. He'd been loading supplies onto his wagon when he noticed the beautiful woman in city clothes, looking lost and desperate. Jake was the foreman of the R Ranch, a man who kept to himself after losing his wife in childbirth 5 years ago. Something about the woman's proud posture, despite her obvious distress, stirred something in his chest he thought had died long ago. "Doc," Jake called out, striding across the street, his spurs jingling with each step. "Everything all right?" Doc Henderson explained the situation, while Sarah stood silently, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. Jake studied her face, intelligent green eyes, determined chin, and a strength that seemed to radiate from her despite her circumstances. "Miss Morrison," Jake said, tipping his hat. "Jake Sullivan. I run the R Ranch about 5 miles outside town. We're in need of a school teacher for the ranch hands children. The position comes with room and board." Sarah looked up at him sharply. I'm not a teacher, Mr. Sullivan." "Can you read and write?" "Of course, but—" "Then you're more qualified than anyone else in 50 miles, Jake said with a slight smile. "Think it over. Mrs. Chen at the boarding house can put you up tonight." That evening, Sarah sat by the small window in her boarding house room, watching the sun paint the vast Montana sky in shades of gold and crimson. The landscape was so different from Boston's narrow streets and towering buildings. Here, the world seemed endless, full of possibility and danger in equal measure. She thought about Jake Sullivan, his steady brown eyes, the way he'd offered help without making her feel like charity. There had been something different about him, something that made her pulse quicken in a way that Thomas Whitmore's letters never had. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Mrs. Chen, the boarding house owner, entered with a cup of tea. "That Jake Sullivan, he's a good man," Mrs. Chen said in her gentle, accented voice. "Lost his wife some years back. Been alone too long, if you ask me. The children at the ranch, they need learning. You'd be doing good work." Sarah made her decision that night, watching the stars emerge in the vast western sky. 3 weeks later, Sarah had settled into an unexpected rhythm at the R Ranch. Every morning, she taught 6 children ranging from 5 to 12 years old under the shade of an old oak tree. The ranch hands had built her a simple schoolroom in the barn for winter, but for now, the outdoors served as her classroom. She discovered she had a natural talent for teaching, and the children adored her. But it was her interactions with Jake that both thrilled and confused her. He would often find reasons to check on the school, bringing the children small gifts, a pretty rock, a wildflower, a carved wooden toy. "You're different than I expected," Jake said one afternoon after the children had run off to help with chores. "How so?" Sarah asked, gathering up the slates they used for writing practice. "Stronger. Most city women would have been on the first train back east." Sarah laughed. Most city women haven't had their entire future disappear in a single conversation. Besides, she looked out over the rolling hills dotted with cattle. "There's something about this place. It grows on you." Jake stepped closer. "And what about the people? Do they grow on you too?" Before Sarah could answer, young Tommy Martinez came running up. Miss Sarah, come quick! One of the mares is having trouble with her foal." In the barn, Jake worked frantically to help the struggling mare. Sarah watched for a moment, then rolled up her sleeves. "What can I do?" "This isn't work for a lady," Jake said through gritted teeth. "I assisted the family physician back in Boston," Sarah replied firmly. "Tell me what you need." For the next hour, they worked side by side. Sarah's steady hands and calm voice helped soothe the mare while Jake delivered the foal. When the healthy colt finally stood on shaking legs, both Jake and Sarah were exhausted, covered in sweat and hay. "I couldn't have done it without you," Jake said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. They stood close together in the dim barn, both breathing heavily from their efforts. Jake reached out and gently brushed a strand of hair from Sarah's face. For a moment, the world stood still. "Sarah, Jake began, but she stepped back, suddenly aware of how improper their situation appeared. "I should clean up," she said softly, but her eyes never left his face. The next morning brought unwelcome visitors. 3 rough-looking men rode into the ranch yard, dust swirling around their horses' hooves. Sarah was teaching the children when she heard the commotion. Jake emerged from the barn, his hand resting casually near his gun. "We're looking for Jake Sullivan," the leader called out. He was a thin man with cold eyes and a cruel mouth. "You found him," Jake replied evenly. "What's your business here?" "Name's Dalton. Heard you got yourself a pretty little schoolmarm. Thought we might pay our respects." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine at the way Dalton looked at her. She quietly ushered the children toward the house. "You've paid them," Jake said, his voice hard as steel. "Now move along." Dalton laughed, a sound like broken glass. "We'll be back, Sullivan. Count on it." As the men rode away, Jake turned to Sarah. "Pack your things. You're going back to town until this is settled." "I will not," Sarah said firmly. "These children need their education, and I won't be frightened away by common thugs." "Sarah, you don't understand. Dalton and his gang have been rustling cattle from ranches throughout the territory. They're dangerous." "Then you need all the help you can get," Sarah replied. "I'm not some helpless flower, Jake Sullivan. I'm staying." That night, Jake found Sarah sitting on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains purple and gold. "You should be afraid," he said, settling beside her on the wooden steps. "I am afraid," Sarah admitted, "but not of them. I'm afraid of something else entirely." "What?" Sarah turned to face him, her green eyes serious in the fading light. "I'm afraid of caring too much, of letting myself hope for something I might lose again." Jake reached for her hand. "Sarah, when Mary died, I thought I'd never feel anything again. Then you stepped off that train, all stubborn pride and hidden strength, and everything changed." "Jake, I love you," he said simply. "I know it's too soon. I know you came here for another man. But I love you, Sarah Morrison. And if you'll have me, I want to spend the rest of my life proving it to you." Before Sarah could respond, the sound of approaching horses shattered the peaceful evening. Dalton and his gang had returned, but this time there were more of them. "Get inside," Jake ordered, drawing his gun. "I'm not leaving you. Sarah said fiercely. The battle was brief but intense. Jake and his ranch hands fought bravely, but they were outnumbered. Just when things looked desperate, the sound of more horses filled the air. Sheriff Morrison and a posse from town had arrived, alerted by one of the children who had ridden to get help. In the chaos that followed, Dalton tried to escape, grabbing Sarah as a hostage. "Let me go or the lady gets hurt," he snarled, pressing his gun to her temple. Sarah looked directly at Jake, her eyes calm and determined. "Trust me," she whispered. In one fluid motion, Sarah elbowed Dalton hard in the ribs and dropped to the ground. Jake's shot rang out, and Dalton fell, his gun spinning away into the dust. Later, as the sheriff and his men took the gang away, Jake and Sarah stood together under the star-filled Montana sky. "You saved my life," Jake said, pulling her close. "You saved mine first," Sarah replied, "the day you offered me hope when I had none left." "Is that a yes?" Jake asked, smiling down at her. "Yes to what?" "To marrying me, to staying here, to building a life together on this wild, beautiful frontier." Sarah reached up and touched his face gently. "Yes, Jake Sullivan, to all of it." Yes, as they kissed under the endless western stars, Sarah realized she had found something she hadn't even known she was looking for. Not just love, but home. Not just safety, but adventure. Not just a husband, but a true partner for whatever challenges the frontier might bring. The Double R Ranch would always be known as the place where two hearts found each other against all odds, where a mail-order bride became a beloved teacher and wife, and where love proved stronger than any danger the Wild West could offer. 6 months later, on a crisp autumn morning with the mountains ablaze in gold and red, Sarah Morrison became Sarah Sullivan in a simple ceremony under the old oak tree where she had first taught the children. The entire town of Silver Creek came to celebrate, and even Doc Henderson shed a tear as he watched the couple exchange vows. As Jake kissed his bride, Sarah knew that sometimes the best destinations are the ones you never planned to reach. And the greatest adventures begin when you're brave enough to say yes to love. The end.